And I'm going to say for everybody who's signed on already, if you want to put in the chat, if you want to put who you are and where you're from, that would be great, so that we can see that and introduce yourself to everybody else. But it does look like we are from all over. And I'll say that we're going to give everybody a couple of minutes after 10 before we start, since
we how we solve that in our company?
How?
Yeah, so you get a 2-minute grace period, and after that, you have to do 10 push-ups. You have to record them and share them with people. So
I think that works. That works. But oh, good, we got from Canada. Cool. So what I do think I'll do, just to start with, while people are still signing on, is I'm just going to share my first slide, just so that gives you a little bit of information. I need to be able to see these slides. And Susie, when you think I should start, just give me a thumbs up. Oh, okay.
You could probably go ahead and get started.
Okay, we might as well get started. Okay, so welcome to everybody who's made it to the North America Regional Meeting for the Global Agritourism Network, GAN. You're muted, so if you could stay muted. We'll take questions at the end after the presentations are over. I know people always like to ask their questions in chat, so we will look at those as well. And then we will say the questions to our speakers to just make things a little bit easier. I'm Scottie Jones. Suzi Spahr is also here. We are the two co-chairs for the North America region. And Lisa Chase is helping with the whole Zoom thing. So you're going to see her popping up here doing some polls. And this specific topic is going to be Agritourism Policy Advocacy 101, how to reframe the conversation to allow for supportive policies. Basically, it means how can you get done what you need to get done to be able to either have agritourism on your farm or support farms with agritourism. Our presenters today are Cassandra Prenn-Vasilakis. You know what? I can't pronounce Cassandra's last name, so she's going to pronounce it for us. She's with Hipcamp. And then also Phil Hallstedt. He is with Cherries and Red Truck Orchard up in Michigan. So we're going to have a big view, like kind of a view across the U.S. And then maybe not just the U.S., a view across many states and countries potentially. And then we're going to have Phil, who's going to do the micro view of specifically what he's doing locally. We're going to have some polls. And what we've said already, introduce yourself in the chat, please, so we know who's here. And we're going to begin with a poll to describe who's in the room, so we kind of know that. We'll follow with a second poll, and then Lisa's got this first one up. So if you can do that, and I believe you can check as many as you want, and then she's going to tell us the results. And then we will know who is sitting in the room right now.
It looks like we have a fair number of farmers, ranchers, and producers, lots of service providers from Extension, and some tourism professionals. So keep putting that information in so that we can get a really well-rounded idea of what we have. Just a few more minutes. Looks like there's also some business owners and managers.
By the way, you can multi-vote, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. So if you are a farmer doing agritourism, you would put yourself under tourism professional as well.
I didn't do that.
Or you could. Okay, so we got those results. So we all kind of see where we're at. And then, do you work with agritourism?
It looks like most people are putting yes regularly. So far, there's no one saying thinking about it, but not yet. And no one saying no, just curious.
Okay, okay, good. Okay, so that means that Cassandra and Phil will know who they are speaking to. Okay, so let's get started here. Let's see, well, let's see this. 74% sometimes. Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, so let me introduce Cassandra. She's actually the team lead for government and community relations at Hipcamp. She's been with Hipcamp for 8.5 years, and she's worked her way through the ranks, actually, from host outreach to onboarding strategy to government community relations. I've crossed paths with Cassandra a number of times, and she is brilliant about what she does. So we've invited her to speak about successful advocacy strategies she's used, and that she's also seen around the country that have helped communities and individuals with regulatory challenges. So I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to let her share her screen, and then welcome Cassandra.
Thank you, Scottie, for that very generous introduction. And thank you to the Global Agritourism Network, Lisa, Suzi, for having me here this afternoon. I am really looking forward to this conversation and really appreciate all of you spending the next 20 or so minutes hearing from me. So I will, let's see. Can you see my screen, first of all, before I? Great, perfect, love that. I want to just give you a quick overview of what I'm hoping to talk about today. And I'll start just with an introduction to help you understand where Hipcamp is coming from in this conversation. I support our government and community relations team. As Scottie said, I've been with Hipcamp since 2016. And we really work at the intersection of rural economic development, outdoor access, and land conservation. And agritourism covers, in some cases, all of those categories. And so I'll share a little bit about where we're coming from in this conversation. I'll share some examples of agritourism regulations, specifically ones that impact overnight stays and camping on farms and ranches, because that's where our expertise and experience lies, though I think the conversation will be relevant across categories. And I'll talk a bit about advocating for agritourism, specifically how to get your decision makers involved, because I think that is a really important step in the process. And then I do want to take some time to touch on coalition building for the future, because I think there are a lot of people, organizations, agencies, many of whom are probably in the room with us today, but I think a lot of whom are not yet, who can really be a resource for you in your community on this topic. And I will call out that there is likely a really wide range of experience here, a lot of different interests and a lot of different geographies. So my hope is that what I share is accessible to everyone and is useful regardless of where you are in the country or in the process. But if you want to talk in more detail about something specific, I'm always happy to. And my email is on the slide. So I'll start with just a quick Hipcamp introduction. We are the #1 app to find and book campsites, and we partner with private landowners to advertise new and unique places for people to stay, camp, and get outside. We operate in 4 countries in all 50 states, which means we've seen all kinds of regulations. And listings on Hipcamp range from your commercial campgrounds and RV parks to farmstays, low-intensity tent and RV sites, cabins and vacation rentals, and camping structures like yurts and canvas tents. We like to say there's something for everyone on Hipcamp. And the way that it works is that landowners sign up with Hipcamp as hosts, create a profile for their property that shows the area that's available to campers, and those campers can search by location and book on our website or our mobile app. Hosts are in control of their pricing and availability. It's free to list on Hipcamp, and we do take a commission that covers all of the credit card transaction fees, as well as liability insurance up to $1 million per occurrence. So we kind of take care of the administrative side of hosting campers. And this is my favorite slide, maybe. When I first started with Hipcamp, I could probably tell you the name and phone number of every single person that listed with us. I'm thrilled to say that that's not true or possible anymore. I mentioned we work with folks in all 50 states, and more than half of the landowners we're partnering with globally actually are welcoming campers to working land. So farms, ranches, wineries, orchards. And that has always been true. Our first ever landowner partners were ranchers in Northern California, but farmers really found us during COVID. It's really where we saw this part of our business expand. So camping became, for many, the most reliable source of revenue at a time when you couldn't sell to restaurants, tasting rooms were closed, and also when campers were really desperate for different experiences. And so that's really when campers found farms through Hipcamp, was during COVID. I mentioned that about half of the folks that we work with welcome campers to working land. Many more than half of the bookings that we facilitate are happening on working land. And that's not a trend. That's kind of the new normal for our business. We see this in our internal data, but we also see it in industry reporting. Campgrounds of America puts out an annual report called the State of North American Camping and Outdoor Hospitality. And listed in their top 10 experiences for what campers are looking for, you have agritourism, rural tourism, and food tourism. So this is a huge opportunity for farmers. It's driving real economic impact for individual landowners and for their communities as well. And that same KOA study estimated that campers in North America spent more than $60 billion during their travels. So Hipcamp hosts in the US earned more than $60 million hosting campers in the last year, and spending on camping travel experiences more broadly in North America exceeded $60 billion in terms of secondary spending in local communities, which is a big capital B number, and one that I recommend you bring to your conversations with decision makers, which we'll get to in just a second. So we really call this category camping-based agritourism, and we find it to be a really good entry point for farmers, but also for communities into the world of overnight stays on working land. And that's because camping is a way to dip a toe into hospitality without a lot of upfront investment and development, depending on where you're located. And there's a lot of interest from both individual landowners, but also from their communities. So chambers of commerce, destination management organizations, farm trails, et cetera, who are thinking about how to leverage camping on private land to keep farms and ranches economically viable, to support rural economic development, to grow tourism and outdoor recreation economies, and to do it in a way that's not converting farmland or taking up much needed housing. So because of that, we are seeing regulations that address camping-based agritourism all over the country and the world. These are just a few examples. The terms that I've listed here are from regulations in townships, counties, and states. It's important to remember that regulations are pretty hierarchical. So counties can get more, but not less restrictive than states typically, and townships and municipalities can get more, but not less restrictive than counties. And these are examples from across all of those different categories. And some of them don't use the term agritourism, and they don't even use the term farm, but they all have implications for camping-based agritourism and farm stays. And my hope is that we can kind of broaden our, when we're thinking about what are the regulations that impact what I want to do on my farm, it might not have the word agritourism in it, or it might not have that word in it yet. And I think that's really important to understand. So even though we have all of these different terms, they're really talking about the same thing. They're talking about typically something fairly small scale without a lot of built infrastructure. On Hipcamp, we typically see between 1 and 5 individual sites, and the regulations that I outlined typically range between 1 and 10, depending on where you are and the size of your property. They include tent sites, glamping sites, van and RV sites, which can often be self-contained, which can make them a really fantastic entry point into this as well. And they also include camping structures like built canvas tents and other types of structures and farm stays. So regulations that support these uses do exist, and they're getting more frequent. We see them more and more. But in places where they don't, operators can run into some barriers, which is the key word. Let's launch that poll. The permits, the price, the studies, the overlays, the state requirements. There are a lot of barriers to this. And I'll wait for just a moment while folks jump into some of the options here.
After you're done filling out the poll, feel free to type into chat, especially if you put other, but even if you just want to expand on what some of the barriers are.
Zoning coming in hot. This is really interesting to see. Thank you for this. I think this is what we hear from folks as well, right? That there are a lot of barriers, and that a lot of the process can be pretty burdensome and maybe not worth it if you just want 2 campsites on your property. And that's typically when someone gets in touch with us, right? When a landowner calls us, when a farm bureau calls us, when a planning department calls us, is there are these regulations or other barriers that are meaning that people can't even get started. And I saw Rachel Callahan in the chat. I had the opportunity to attend the California Agritourism Summit last week, where Rachel really built everything around a theme of everybody has a role to play in agritourism development. And I think that is so true, and bringing that forward into this conversation as well. And Hipcamp's role is typically as a convener. We bring people together, and we are also subject matter experts, not on agriculture, but on small scale camping and low impact recreational uses that are compatible with agricultural production, farmland preservation, and open space. So we get involved in agritourism development when we are asked to, and we continue to be asked to help farmers, farm trails, counties that want to support options for farmers in the face of tariffs, market changes, drought, but find that outdated land use and state policy can make that really hard. And that brings me to thinking about how you can affect change. And the first thing that you have to think about is what you want to do, right? Is it going to be a farm stand? Is it going to be camping? Is it going to be educational experiences like tours? And what is in place that might be stopping you? Or maybe a reframe, like what are the opportunities for your government to better support you and what you want to do on your property? So if there are already agritourism regulations in your area, do they need to be updated? We were working with a county once that said, oh yeah, we have a permit for that. That's great to hear. And I asked them how many people had applied, and it turned out nobody ever had. And they had had this permit available since before anybody in that office had started working there. And that doesn't really make it a permit. It kind of makes it a prohibition. And it turned out that was because it came with a multi-$1,000 application fee, right? No guarantee that you'll be approved. It's just going to cost you that much to apply. So that was actually a really clean example, right? The regulations are there. They actually were really well put together and accessible. It was just that cost that was a barrier. So if you already have something in your county in place, what is it about it that isn't working for you and what needs to be updated? And if there aren't agritourism regulations in your area, do they need to be created? Is there an opportunity to do that? And once you have figured that out, and I'll pause while we wait for folks to answer the poll here before I move on.
Looks like most people are saying that their regulations are somewhat complicated, but there's also a fair number that are saying extremely complicated. So that provides some context.
Thank you. That sounds right to me. And like once you've figured out what you're working with, right, what the landscape is in your community, you'll want to figure out who you need in your corner to make what you want to do possible. Who are your decision makers? And that's usually going to be your local elected officials, right? And if you're in a county, they tell county staff, for example, what to work on and prioritize, and they have the final say in what a policy looks like. So you'll want to find a champion for your issue at that level. And you'll want to think about the ecosystem that they are working in, which at the most basic level is going to include some type of planning and building department who's going to be tasked with writing or updating your regulations. And then some type of planning commission or zoning board that's going to be making recommendations to your local elected officials about what those regulations should look like. And it looks different everywhere, but that's kind of broad strokes, the chain. And there are other people to consider. It's not an exhaustive list, right? You have the agricultural commissions, you have environmental health, there is an ecosystem in your community. But when you're thinking about who your decision makers are, you really want to know who's going to be signing off at the end of the day, right? Who has the final say here? You want to know who you're talking to, because that's going to help you with your next step, which is thinking about what you want to ask for, thinking about how you want to present your problem. So you want to identify what the problem is, and you want to give an example that helps somebody that has no idea what you're talking about understand what you want to do. Maybe you want to host 2 campsites on your farm, but your county doesn't have regulations for small scale camping. Instead, you might need to pursue the same permit required for a 200 site RV park. That comes with paved roads, flood lighting, built and gendered bathhouses. This is a real example. All infrastructure that is prohibitively expensive, incompatible with agricultural production, and just out of step with the scale of use that you're interested in. Now you have your problem and a clear articulation of why it's a problem. And then you want to connect that to your audience, to their values, to their concerns, to their self-interest. So spend some time thinking about what is going to move them. What do they care about? And this involves doing some research, right? You're going to look into, what the agritourism regulations are in your area, what would need to change for you to do what you want to do, and then how to communicate that to the person that you need to influence. So is your local elected official someone that talks a lot about rural economic development? Do they talk a lot about farmland preservation, education? I firmly believe there's something in this topic for everyone. You just need to know your audience and meet them where they are. Find the thing you really agree about and bring an opportunity to them as a win for them and for their community, to help them understand why they should care and why it will matter to their constituents, which is you, right? They work for you. You're their constituent. So you really want to take some time to speak to the folks in a way that is going to reach them. And then you want to think about how to give them a solution, which is something I'm going to talk about in just a minute. Because ultimately, you want to make it easy for them to say yes, right? You want to lay everything out for them. So the obvious answer is yes, we should do this. We should make the change that's going to support you and your business. And when you're thinking about getting to your ask and what needs to change in order to do what you want to do on your property, you could be thinking about, like we just saw in the poll, a zoning issue. There could be a setback requirement that's prohibitively large. There might be an inaccessible permitting cost. Could be a lack of regulations altogether. It'll be easier to make your ask if you have a clear example of what a solution looks like, which brings me to the Agricultural Enterprise Ordinance, which passed in Santa Barbara County, California in December of 2024 and was implemented in January of this year. Their goal was to provide new opportunities for farmers and ranchers to increase revenues and enhance the economic productivity of their operations. And the reason why I bring this specific example up, there are other examples out there, but this one covers a lot. So you'll be able to find something relevant and useful to what you want to do and what you're thinking about advocating for in your area. It covers uses that support agricultural activities. I'm actually going to drop in the chat just the website in case folks are interested. And I'm going to also drop in the chat. There is a summary of approved uses that can be just a helpful starting off point. But so it covers uses that support agricultural activities. It covers processing and aquaponics. It covers lumber processing, tree nut hulling. And then it also covers rural recreational uses from small scale campgrounds and farm stays to incidental food service and events. So there's a lot in here, and it will give you a starting off point for whatever conversation you want to have, because there are so many examples of different agricultural enterprises, agritourism uses in this ordinance. And it also covers each of these topics as well. So you don't have to start from scratch when you're thinking about what do I need to consider when I'm making a recommendation or asking someone to draft an ordinance. It includes tiered permitting, which I think is a really big one. Smaller scales, certain activities have lower level permit requirements or even permitted by right. So if you want to have 2 campsites, you might be looking at a different process than if you want to have 12. I think that's really important and how this should work. It comes with zoning requirements, has density limitations for how many accommodations, cars, people you can have depending on the size of your property. It includes setback requirements from property lines, offsite residences, and adjacent agricultural operations that vary by use. And there are different approaches to different accommodation types, as well as on-site supervision requirements and noise regulations. They cover a lot. They've done a lot of work on this, and it is an incredibly thorough piece of legislation. And I am going to show on the next slide. Go to the links that I shared in the chat. This is just to give you an idea of what tiered permitting can look like for a single use, so you can see how much detail there is. In case you don't believe me that there's something in here that can be helpful for your unique area. So this shows the different standards and requirements for camping with different permitting levels: zoning clearance, land use permit, conditional use permit. And it also shows kind of the minimum standards regardless of what permit is required. And I show this as part of this presentation because I think the biggest barrier to progress is actually often resources and prioritization in your community. So it's helpful to have something to point to have something that's pretty baked, so that you can make recommendations about how to apply it. You're making a clear ask and you're part of the solution, which can really help move things forward. You're not just saying to someone, solve my problem. You're saying to them, I've thought a lot about this problem, why it's a problem, why we should solve it. And here's an example of how somebody else is solving it for their community. It's a little palate cleanser here. And I want to mention that Hipcamp is here to be helpful to you as well, right? Coming back to this, everyone has a role to play in supporting agritourism development. In Santa Barbara, that was a lot of people. The process started in 2016 with a working group thinking about a Farmstay ordinance, which later evolved into the Agricultural Enterprise Ordinance. Hipcamp was not engaged from the beginning. We were introduced to this process pretty late in the stage there. And we were introduced to it by landowners that really wanted camping to be part of the conversation or to stay in the conversation. And they were asking us, how should we think about this ordinance? So it was everyone from local landowners and the Farm Bureau to destination management organizations, food safety groups, planning commissioners, supervisors, the Coastal Commission. It took a village, and continued advocacy and engagement was important every step of the way. You can't just pop in for one conversation. If you want to have an impact, as I'm sure Phil is going to share with us, you have to stay engaged throughout the process to get the outcome that you want. And organizations, including Hipcamp, are here to help. We put case studies together to share with other jurisdictions about successful policy changes. We have data to demonstrate the economic impact of small-scale camping in different areas. So as you're thinking about what changes you'd like to see to support agritourism development in your community, think about the coalition in place to support you. You don't have to do this alone. I know that's, the whole point of this group too, right? You have this entire community of folks who are thinking critically and creatively about what this can and should look like all over the world. And so don't hesitate. You don't get the help that you don't ask for. And this is just an example. This is just a snapshot of some of the organizations that Hipcamp has partnered with on agritourism development and low impact camping regulations in California alone. Everyone from farm bureaus and farm trails to outdoor recreation and equity groups, conservation organizations, regional trail partners, not to mention planning commissions and lawmakers who want to support these changes, as well as the thousands of landowners who are writing to their state and local decision makers and sharing feedback at every step of the process. I think I said before that we get involved when our community asks us to, and we work in coalition with a big tent of stakeholders, which I think is the best way to have every perspective that you want represented at the table and to open your own ways of thinking in directions that you may not have thought about before. And I'll zoom out on this just briefly to highlight kind of why I think this is such a big tent. This is an important moment for policies that enable income diversification to support the economic viability of farms and ranches, as we all know, while supporting economic growth in rural communities and creating opportunities for outdoor access. We are in a really specific moment right now, which I think creates a lot of very specific opportunities. This is the time when shifts in how we manage public lands will have wide-ranging implications for open space, for recreation, for the economies of gateway communities. It's also a time when tariffs, market changes, economic trends are disproportionately impacting small businesses and agricultural operators. And there's a real understanding that we need to be giving counties and landowners more options, not less. We need policies that make this easy, that make it easy for farmers to participate in and benefit from tourism and outdoor recreation economies in a way that keeps the majority of land in production and that doesn't break the bank. I think we're in a really specific moment where you can speak very impactfully to your decision makers about what this will mean for your entire community and its implications in the long term. And we're here to be a partner to you, a resource to communities, to organizations, to individuals that are thinking about these things. bringing it back. Everyone has a role to play in agritourism development. So if you want to talk more about this or learn about the policies that we're involved with and supportive of that are in process right now, and how we can learn from each other, please don't hesitate to reach out, because I would love to hear what you're thinking about and working on in your areas, and really broaden my own understanding of what work on these uses is like all over the country. So I will end there. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. And so just to reiterate that you also don't just do this for California, but you are involved in other states as well,
That's
in
right.
terms of your outreach that you can do. Right?
Yep. So we work with organizations and individual partners in all 50 states. We do also work on regulations in Canada, Australia, and the UK. There have been some big agritourism wins in Australia. I know this is the North American chapter, but yeah, we're constantly learning about new opportunities. And I think I said, people ask us to get involved. We're pretty reactive. We can't be proactive everywhere at once. So if something's moving where you are, let us know how we can help.
Okay, wonderful. And so, Phil, thank you. The UPIC, I think right now, is it UPIC at all? And anyway, he's been working on trying to get some farm stays onto his property, ran into some issues locally. So he is going to give us more of a local perspective of what he has done to try to move this forward. And specifically, it's kind of using what Cassandra said, is how can you get to yes? How can you help your regulators be able to say yes to you? I think that's the point. So anyway, go, Phil. We would love to hear what you have to say.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. And Cassandra, we spoke many times over the last several years. And so again, there is a lot of resources out there, and that's the main thing. The other thing I want to talk about is just, I think you need to also step back and think about, what is your business model? I mean, what's your farming model? And so I'd like to kind of tee up farm stays as part of a business model, if you will. And then hopefully at the end of that, I will go into depth in terms of farm stays. So just bear with me as we go through this. So it helps to advance the first slide. Interesting. Here we go. Sorry. So my wife and I founded our farm. We're a first generation cherry farmers. We're focused. We love and passionate about cherries and the UPIC. And our focus is really not on cherries. Our focus is on creating an experience and community on the farm. I mean, that is what we are. We're big in education. We are not big in terms of great big events, et cetera. That's not what we're about, or our farm is about. If you see in terms of our UPIC operations, again, you can see these kind of slides: happy smiles, happy faces. Our values here at the farm are the land. We have very, very unique land here that is super special in terms of agriculture, and it's disappearing rapidly. The cost of a farmland here is between $30,000 to $50,000 an acre. It started 15 years ago with us under $8,000 an acre. So you get a feel for the pressure that is going on these small farms for them to sell out, et cetera. But we want to have that land. We want to communicate to people. We want to provide access to that land and hopefully create joy, like you see in this picture. I talk about the challenges, and again, land is just one thing. I'm sure all of you who are farming see this issue. Another one's in terms of labor availability, both for seasonal and year-round. People are aging out, and to be honest with you, when you're sitting on 100-acre farm that's worth $3 million or $5 million, they raise smart kids and they raise smart grandkids, and they see their grandparents in their 70s, 80s never making a profit year after year after year. They're smart and they're looking at alternatives to cashing out. And then specifically in cherries, I mean, we've had some very difficult times. I don't know if any of you followed it a little bit, but first of all, we've had to reduce prices to the farmers. We've had some disasters. Now we're in our third disaster. We're about ready to roll into one, unfortunately. And then more importantly, the pitting capacity. So the processors where we can bring the fruit, they have purchased 12 processing facilities around the country. They're owned by a Middle East hedge fund, and they don't really care about farming. They care about making money. And so they have very low tolerance for any kind of fruit that is underperforming financially. So in spite of this, the question is how do you move ahead? And my feeling, I come from 20 years of pharmaceuticals, did that as a career in product development mainly. And so my view is always that innovation drives growth. But the issue in farming is who leads that innovation. And my feeling is we need new farms, new models for small farms. And in this model, I call it farm forward. So there's really three things that you need. One, you need to be attached to a value-added product. If you're growing a commodity, it's going to be very difficult. I don't care what the commodity is. You have to address seasonal workforce housing. You have to have access to it. And the third is you need to diversify your income to what I call non-ag on-farm income. And it's a framework. It's the framework of being attached to a value add, understanding the importance of housing and you being involved with it. And then finally, really finding ways to generate non-ag on-farm income. I was interviewed by NPR this last fall. And again, they shared that 86% of farmers in the United States work off the farm. And they do that in order to get benefits and income and stability. And to me, that's just wrong. We got to have a different business model that supports even small farms that they can be economically viable. When we go through that, the question there is how? How do you do that? That's what we need to do. The question is how. And if you break up agritourism to me in these two different X and Y axes, you take agriculture value add, meaning on the far right, you're adding a lot of value. On the far left, you have basically are growing a commodity. And then you take a look at tourism. So at the top, you have super high intensity, high impact, high density efforts. Down at the bottom, basically very little at all. And what I find is the following. And it's just something as a framework to think about what are you trying to do? What are you trying to grow? Where do farmstays fit in this? In terms of the upper right, you have high capital, high complexity, farm markets, farm restaurants, wineries, et cetera. They're bringing in a lot of people, a lot of impact, and they're adding a lot of value. We're trying to create a model where you're adding value to a product that's non-alcohol related, which has its own challenges, but something we believe strongly in. On the top left, you have these entities, these activities, which again, I'm not against them, but I really ask everybody to think about how does this fit and what do you want to pursue as your own farm? There are pros and cons of these efforts. And up here, we have a high degree of tourism. They are plentiful. They're also creating a lot of issues because people look at the volume of people going in, they look at the noise created by the concerts and the wedding venues in the agricultural area, and they get frustrated, okay? So the thought is then, I'm trying to get my slide to move forward. Apologize. There we go. The idea is to focus on what about this? What about a single family entity? What can we do for those? And really, that's where I'm really focused on personally. This idea of having farm stays, having workshops where you can bring people in small groups, educate them, or there might be other ways to generate on-farm, non-ag income. We're also creating a framework where we purchase product from local farms, and in exchange for them growing them the way we want to, we pay them a higher price. And this we learned actually, Lisa, when we were doing the farm tour with pigs, where they were making the couple was making this incredible Italian framed hard salami. If you can recall, maybe put in the chat the name of that farm. It was fantastic. And my point is, instead of just growing larger and larger and more pigs, they reached out to their neighbors and said, look, if you grow them in this way, we can share the value. And that is what I think we need more agritourism products available. So let's apply this to what we're trying to do here at Hallstedt Homestead. This is the framework. So basically, first thing is you need to have passion for farming. You got to grow or raise something in this entity, and you got to be great at it. Then there's these three concentric circles. There's attachment or creation of a value-add product. there is addressing workforce housing, and there's non-ag on-farm income. So I want to go through just to illustrate how we're using this model here on our farm, Hallstedt Homestead. So we developed a new product. Basically, it's a vinegar. So hopefully you're familiar with apple cider vinegar. We have developed a cherry vinegar with the mother, and it is delicious. I mean, you can actually, many people sip it, although it's mainly used where you'd use normal vinegars, such as salad dressings, marinades, etc. We launched in 2024, went to full production here at our farm. So we have a production facility here, and we're integrating with other farms. And how we're doing that is we are paying them a higher amount than what they can get standardly, or we'll be giving them a choice of getting a royalty for the bottles that are added value. So that way, in exchange, though, what we get is they grow the cherries as we need them for vinegar. It's a little bit different process. And more importantly, we get to use their name and likeness, okay? Their name, their history, their story. Many of these farms go back 100, 150 years here up in our country, and people are interested in that. So we'll bring that underneath this brand called Red Truck Orchards. This is the vinegar that we are launching, and if you want to see, okay, why is it different? Well, these are the antioxidants compared to red wine vinegar or apple cider vinegar. It truly is, I will tell you, a better vinegar. So that's one element. The second element, we have to be involved with housing. We have the land to develop workforce housing. And workforce housing up in our area, like in many areas around the country, is a hot, hot topic. I believe we need new models of that housing and really of living, where we're just not getting larger and larger and storing more and more stuff. So we're trying to develop a unique community on our farm, which it focuses on shared use. And it's an alternative to we just got to shrink the home smaller and smaller and smaller, but instead have a shared use mentality that we can collaborate with the local farming community or local business community to provide housing. The map that I'm showing here is basically shows in red was our original farm. In yellow is another 11 acres that we added in the last year. So we have 64 acres total. Our goal is to develop a residential process that's already in play. It's called the open space residential development. And a little bit of research that I've done, many communities have zoning allowance to provide open space residential development, where you take that 64 acres and you no longer are allowed to split it after you develop these X number of lots for single family housing. We also, from a production manufacturer, from a farming standpoint, need to address housing, both from a standpoint of our value add products. So we need professionals in production, marketing, sales, etc. So we need the talent and the salaries, as well as, of course, housing for seasonal housing. And we think we have a model that we're developing that can make that happen. Finally, I want to talk about the non-ag on-farm income. So we started this back in 2000. And again, this is off the observation that I saw that the majority of farmers work off the farm. People said, just do it under the table, which we don't operate that way. And so we felt if we could change the zoning regs, we could basically allow this to be applied to our township. In our township, we have 10 townships that make up the county. And I think there's 2,000 townships across the state of Michigan. And so there was nothing available to us when we got started on this process. Right now, what we did is we had to get the zoning ordinance in place, which I have put into the chat if you're interested in looking at a template, much like some of the materials that Cassandra shared. And then we defined the special use permit. So even though it's been 4 years, just to let you know, folks, it's a long path. Now we're going through the special use permit that allows our farm to meet the requirements that would allow us to have up to 4 campgrounds, campsites on them. What we came up with and agreed after a lot of discussion was that we would, in the state of Michigan, you can have up to 4 campsites on a parcel land and not be a campground. We did not try to change the zoning from agriculture to recreation. That would have been a nightmare. So we focused on having the ability to have a maximum of 4 sites for active commercial or working farm. It has to abide by all of the health regulations. And these are temporary sites. You're not building a permanent home. They have to be able to be moved, but they could be hard-sided like the glam site you see in that upper picture. One of the things that, which I would argue, say to you is this: if you're going down this road, first of all, a couple learnings. Number one, we did not realize how well we can grow bananas here on the 45th parallel. It gets cold here. We were down in negative 10s regularly during the winter, and this last year we had about 10, 15 feet of snow. But boy, the banana harvest was huge. And if you're not familiar with bananas, bananas are billed absolutely nothing anywhere near anybody. Okay. Now these are Nimbas, not in my backyard, on steroids. There are even a new acronym came in as Citizens Against Virtually Everything. Those are cavers or caves. Yes, we exist those, but it's mainly the bananas who came forward and they really pushed back. And so what I did is I went in, first of all, and looked at the existing master plan. This was one element of the master plan that was already in place. Use the resources that are out there. And the long-term standing master plan for our township was definitely to encourage prime agricultural lands and preserve those areas, provide supplementary income, and consider proposals for lodging. That's where I started, but the banana harvest still was strong. The next thing we did is we spent a lot of time talking about the benefits. It's just not a downside, there's a benefit. And up here, we are the oldest county in the state of Michigan. And again, we have a lot of retirees up here. But as we talked about the benefits, they said, well, that's not something I would want to do. I wouldn't want to go glamping on your primitive campsite. In their 75 and, with the walker. Well, that's not who we're trying to attract. And also in our county, we're trying to attract millennials. We're trying to attract Gen Xers. So the idea of pulling in glamping and other efforts, it kind of helps soften and say, these are some of the people who we want to bring into the county. Nonetheless, this was our timeline. So we began in September, reaching out to the Planning Commission. We pulled in our local extension officers from Michigan State University. I would highly recommend you seek out your local university. They were very, very helpful. We were proactive. We didn't wait for our neighbors to understand what we were trying to do. I put together a small overview and reached out to every neighbor that touched our property, which were 12. And what I found is that 80% of them actually would either support the idea because they knew us and they knew how we would operate it, or they would not object, which is what I asked them. I said, you may be 100% against this, but if you believe in land rights and you want to have farm land preserved, then at least would you not object? So they would not object, or if they would support, they were in the 80% that were supportive of what we were trying to do, in my opinion. We had to go through an entire public comment period, and then we worked on the text amendment. But at the end of the day, it was approved in November 2024. And so we now are open to any of the farms in our township. We're now trying to spread the word across the county and then across even the regions or the U.S. To really make farm stays available as we define them. So how can you assist? That's my last slide. Number one, I'm a cherry farmer, so I mean, eat cherries, okay? Tart cherries, sweet cherries, just eat them. If you're interested in a new product, of course, redtruckorchards.com, sign up and we will direct ship that to you. But really more importantly, where we are right now is if you have any knowledge on these next topics would be really helpful. I am trying to put in place a art and farm trail instead of a wine trail or a bourbon trail, et cetera. This is something I've been working on and trying to implement. We're working with a local nonprofit that supports small farms. Again, Farmstay zoning and operational successes. If you're doing this and understand what we're trying to do, give us some information in terms of how you can be helpful with this. Agritourism liability statute. So there's, I think, 37 states that have limitations for agritourism. In Michigan, we do not have that. And we are trying to raise awareness and interest by our legislators to pass an agritourism liability statute, because we tried this 3 years ago. To be honest with you, Farm Bureau was one that did not support this because they felt it was not needed. But we are going back and trying this again. As we saw early in the poll, liability is a big concern for many farmers bringing in agritourism activities. We need to find a way to do that. And then finally, if any of you use an app called Halo, Huylo, what it's used is to coordinate volunteers. By the way, if you have volunteers on your farm, you are violating federal labor law. This was explained to the farmers up here in Michigan by a well-meaning nonprofit, and it is true. It is not enforced, but if you are operating a for-profit business and you have volunteers who share their time, you could be cited. And so what we're trying to do is basically have a club. We call them Hallstedt Homestead Heroes. We refer to them as our adjunct staff. And we're trying to coordinate their activities in terms of what's going on the farm, how they'd be interested in helping through an app called Halo. Anything you do could be helpful to help us with that. And that's it. So feel free to reach out to myself. You got my phone number there at text. I'm in WhatsApp as well as email. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was fascinating. And I'm going to just get through to this last slide here. So we know her, we know him. Whoops. So first, though, I want to say thank you to both those presenters. But if you all have questions, you can certainly, let's put them in the chat, because I guess there is no Q&A on this. And I was just, can I start off by asking Phil, how much time did you spend to get through that policy with your county so that you could then apply for a farm stay?
When you say time, it was 4 years in duration. At the upfront, it was probably 50% of my time for about 4 months of getting all the materials pulled together, et cetera. And then it was ongoing, probably about 10% of my time for 18 months. And there's a lull then, and then I came back and really pushed hard for about 20% of my time, and did a lot of networking, and finally got passed.
Thank you. Are there other questions that anybody has for these two?
There were a couple of questions in the chat that I saw originally. One was asking for more information about farm trails. And I see Cassandra put an example in, but I don't know if perhaps there would be interest to explain a little more about farm trails.
Let me explain what I'm trying to do. We heard about this at the Vermont show on the workshop on international agritourism. And the idea of whether it's a farm trail exists. What I was interested in and got some interest here was merging art and farm. What we're really trying to do is make people aware of where like the farms are in their community, of the history. They may not have a farm stand, but it's important thing for people to know where their food is from and the uniqueness of those farms. Also, though, of course, if they're doing any kind of U-pick, if they're doing any kind of farm stand where there might be fresh produce available, and this farm trail, people could basically continuously kind of learn about seasonality and see where different food is available, and then merge it with art, because many times art and farming merge together. And so we're looking at collaborating with some grants. There's been some work it was called Detour up in Wisconsin that is hugely successful at building awareness and also monetizing both arts and the farms.
And I see that a few others have added other examples into the chat, so I encourage everyone to look at those. The other question that I saw was, is there a way to expedite the process of getting these types of approvals? I will say from my part, it's my understanding that generally speaking, it very much depends on your local regulators and your local staff. But I'm very happy to have either Phil or Cassandra or anybody else speak also to that question.
And I wasn't sure if this question was about the process to get individual approval or the process to change, like to see regulatory change through. I think the answer to both is it depends. Depends on if something's already moving, like a zoning code update that you can get attached to kind of a predetermined timeline, though those can get extended. If you're talking about the process for an individual, I think it's dependent on what the regulations are, and it does really depend on where you're located. But something that we advocate for quite a bit is this tiered permitting structure so that there are different timelines attached. So it might make sense to go through a really extensive process if you have a larger scale operation. That's going to take a lot longer because of everything that's involved. But if you're hosting 1 or 2 or 3 sites, maybe there is a potential for something a little bit less involved. And so that's where we see things like administrative permits and zoning clearance be really great tools where you basically are checking boxes, right? Yes, I meet all of these requirements, as opposed to going through on-site evaluations. Whether that's a possibility is really going to depend on where you're located. There are a number of counties in California, as well as North Carolina and Colorado, that have recently made changes to support that more expedited process. So the short answer is yes, and it depends. And then from the kind of regulatory change, Phil's timeline is a great example, and that's one of the shorter ones that I've seen. But I think it is about prioritization and getting your community to understand the need, the impact, the urgency of what you're asking for.
If I could add, I think Cassandra, you're spot on. I think a couple of things I can tell you what will not work. Okay, in our community here, remember, township level in Michigan, it's very local. It's your friends, it's your neighbors. One, hire a lawyer and think you're just going to push it through. It will be stalled forever. Okay, and so would not recommend that. And the other thing I would definitely do is, again, be persistent. Tell them you're not going to go away. I think that's the main element. Is when I kept coming back over and over and over, kept commenting in public comments, had some other people commenting public comments. That's when we started getting traction. When they realized they're not going to sweep you away from underneath the rug.
All right. And then the other question that I saw here was asking, and I think this is specific to Phil, can you say a little more about your volunteer club model? I think that's a concept that's a little bit newer. I am grateful for you pointing out that there are labor issues associated with volunteers. And so if you have a way to work within that framework, I think everyone's a little interested in that.
Absolutely. So what we have formed is a club, okay? And so you pay $10 into the club. You have a signed liability waiver being in the club. And what I'm looking to use with Halo to match it up better and really scale the model is to say, hey, this week we've got this going on that we need some help with. And here's some activities on the farm that you might be interested in. Example, we do maple syrup in March. And we don't sell the maple syrup, but people are always interested in coming by and seeing what that involves. Right now, we have acres of ramps. Ramps are this little onion garlic combination. We do not harvest them, but we love it when people come on up. We show them, educate them how to harvest them properly so that they can continue. And then they come on up and partake of it. So if you join the club, you're able to do that. Also, we have other activities on the farm that just really helps to have a lot of hands. And we have people who are looking for their retirement to be more than basically hitting a little white ball around 18 acres, or doing something, let's say even watching the grandchildren day after day after day. And they want to be part of something. And when you put them in a role that they are contributing and you give them 100% flexibility, meaning you show up when you want to. This is not a paid role. We just enjoy having you here and you enjoy being here. We call that a win-win. New York Times rented the orchard now going on 3 years ago for one day. We had 800 people go through. We had over 20 volunteers, quote unquote, adjunct personnel help us pull that off. And then we had a big party. So the point is they can really learn a lot about agriculture. and it's a great model to help with seasonality, and really also, of course, it showcases your farm to the general public.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you to everybody. We're at the end of our hour. We've got some really good links in the chat that you all need to copy and go take a look at. And I do want to thank our presenters for us today. You guys did a great job. It was really, really interesting. And thank you all for attending. If you're not a GAN member, I've got some links right here, but I assume you probably are since you got the invitation. So thank you very much, and we will see you next time.
Yes, and Suzi and Scottie will follow up with an email. So if you didn't get all the links, we'll make sure we include links and information about other upcoming Global Agritourism Networking events in that email. So thank you, Suzi, Scottie, Phil, Cassandra, and everyone else for joining us today.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.